Welcome back. So our next question to tackle is how to handle the how much do you want to make question.
Ha,
Yes.
it's such an unfair question.
Yes, and we get this question all the time.
Yeah.
All the time, all the time. So any thoughts before we dive into?
Lots.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, one thing I want to clarify is there's another sub question, which is how much have you made or how much did you make in your last job?
Yes.
In many states, including our state of Connecticut, that's an illegal question to ask.
Yeah.
So you want to skirt that one. If it is legal in your state, we'll talk later about how to handle it. But in general, when you're asked how much you want to make, it's not because the hiring manager wants to make sure they pay you enough.
Right.
That is never the motivation. The motivation is to see how little they can pay you.
Yes.
And as women returning to work, as most of our audience is, you're going to lowball it. If you've been out of the workplace for a long time, you're going to be thinking about what you made in 2002 or 2010 and feel like that's a lot, but it's not. You're not going to account for the increase in salaries since then. If you're lacking confidence, which most of you are, you're going to lowball because you're going to feel like you're coming in at somewhat of a disadvantage. So the idea is to really avoid that question as much as possible.
Yes. And what we're going to advocate for is that you don't lowball yourself, right?
Absolutely.
So we're going to teach you how not to do that today. So number one, and this kind of goes with what you were just saying, is be informed, right?
For sure. Yeah.
Be informed and arrive to this conversation informed. So if you know this is something you're going to get asked, you want
I mean,
to be
even if you don't know it, I think to your point, just be prepared even if you're going to be asked or not. So there are online tools. We've referenced them in prior videos. Glassdoor, salary.com are places that you can go to find out what does a business analyst make, and they'll give you some ranges. You can also, within those platforms, query about specific companies to see what their salaries look like.
Yeah.
Some companies have full transparency.
Yeah.
And if they're a public company, you can just look up what the salaries are. If you know someone in the organization, you can feel it out that way.
Yeah.
This might be a good use of Chat GPT too.
Oh, yeah.
Because they can aggregate all these sources, or that tool can. And if you say, how much does a business analyst make at United Healthcare? They can give you some information. So don't just use one source. Use a variety of sources to get an idea.
Yep. I think it's really important when you're thinking about this question coming at you is to really look at where you are in the process of an interview, right?
Definitely.
So let's kind of take it through the whole process. Let's start an early interview. So say you're asked this question on your first screening interview.
Right. If you're being asked the question by a recruiter on a first screening interview, their job really is just to get rid of you. And sadly, that's just their job. Their job is to take, of the 4,000 applicants, the 300 that they're going to screen and find 25 that they're going to interview. So they're looking to offboard you or offload you. So the answer to the question always in that case is, it is really too early in the process for me to name a number. I didn't come in here with a number in mind.
Right.
I'm really just learning more about the organization and the role. And until I know more about it, I couldn't really even give you an informed number. However, if you want to share what the salary band is, I could tell you if I think that's even within striking distance.
Okay.
And then no matter what they say, unless it's way too low, then I'm in the wrong place. But if the band is within, reason, and even if the high end is more than you've ever made, you will say something like, the higher end of that range sounds just about right for me. Or the higher end of the range sounds acceptable to me. It's always the higher end.
So what I love about this is that it tosses it back to them, because often when you get this question, and I think it's why people are so hot to get the answer of how to handle this, it feels overwhelming.
Oh, yeah.
It feels like, oh my gosh, I have to give an answer and I don't want to screw this up. And this is a really important part of why I'm going back to work. And so just having that script in mind of, early in the process, not ready to answer that.
Yeah.
But could you give me that band?
Yeah.
What is the band? So it's throwing it back, and it's also shifting the dynamic of even the conversation, right?
And that's a good reason not to be able to give an answer. I don't know enough about this job. I mean, you might have a span of control of 80. You might have a span of control of 6. That makes a big difference in terms of how much work you'll be doing.
Yes.
And the value of that work. So really important to just push that question off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so now we're getting to mid-interview, which is where you could probably get some of the information that you're talking about now.
So if a hiring manager asks you that, you could say, I was asked that on the entry here by the recruiter, and I really came in open. I'd like to learn more about what the opportunity is. I'm learning this now in this process, and I'd love to hear what you're looking at for a range, but I didn't come in here with a specific number because, as I understand it, compensation is so much more than the base salary. So when we get to that point, I'll be really curious to see the full offer. But again, if you want to just give me some guidance on what you're thinking, I can let you know if I think that's, going to be reasonable or not.
Right.
I mean, again, pushing it back on them, but giving them the added insight into how you're going to be looking at this compensation in a much more holistic way.
Yes.
I'm looking at not just what you're paying me, but all the other ways that I'm paid.
Yes. And if you have not heard or watched our negotiating a job offer, you're going to want to go watch that video because it's really going to take you through the next steps, because the next step would be where you're actually getting the offer. And this is more in the stage of just answering that question as you're moving through the process.
Right. So hopefully, as you've moved through the process, so every process is unique, but the entry, the first recruiter is going to be a short phone conversation. Then there might be a second recruiter or maybe an HR person in a Zoom. And then you might meet with the hiring manager. Then you might meet with the team. Throughout the process, you're gaining information. You're meeting people. You're talking to people, right? And they ask you what you want to make. You might say something like, well, through my conversations, I've learned that the range for this position is 80 to 120. And I think based on my experience, based on the level of expertise I'll be bringing to the role and the fact that I'm here as a final panelist, I would be comfortable at the higher end of that range. Again, you're not giving them a number. Higher end could be 100 to 120. Right? I think at the point where you're a finalist in a panel interview, I think they've earned the right to learn a little bit more about what you want to make.
Yeah.
If you are at all concerned that maybe your competition is lowballing and you know the company is very financially strapped and there has been a lot of focus on the financial part, you might couch it by saying, but again, I look at compensation holistically. The salary is not the be all and end all of my compensation, nor is it the thing I'm going to pay the most attention to. I'm really going to be looking at this offer in a very holistic way. I'll be looking at all elements of it, right? Another thing you can throw out there at any point would be based on my conversations with other employers. It would seem to me like this would be a better range if they're way off base, or it would seem to me that I am best suited for the higher end of that range. So throwing in just that little reminder that you are a hot commodity, that other companies are talking to you, that you potentially could have other offers. It's always good.
So there you have it. How to answer that crazy question that everybody gets all worked up about of how much do you want to make? If you liked what you heard today, make sure that you like this video and that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you want to learn more about us and our programming, you can visit us at www.preparetolaunchu.com.